Could you tell us a little bit more about the team that you're leading now and what your most important initiatives are and the things you're most excited about?
So I have 3 teams under me now. So there is enterprise data team. I also lead enterprise architecture team for Voya, and I also lead Salesforce development team for Voya. That's a very interesting combination that works amazingly well. And I'm really excited about having that combination of the teams under me. Of course, I was hired for my data background. And what attracted me to the job and that makes it incredibly interesting is building basically greenfield development for business. So I have done greenfield development, both my jobs at FINRA, at Citi, at Deutsche Bank, it was developing from scratch. And I like my job in Citi and Deutsche Bank. I don't want to suggest that those were not good jobs. They were excellent jobs. But a lot of the focus on the data was on the regulatory compliance, which was incredibly important because if we weren't able to satisfy regulatory requirements, it was a matter of survival for both Citibank and Deutsche Bank. However, what attracted me significantly to Voya and the business that they are building this reusable enterprise data capabilities to advance the business. And to increase the business, to understand our customers better, to bring more customers to Voya. But it's not only for sales, it's also the mission of Voya is retirement, to improve retirement outcomes for American companies, for people. And so a lot of data being used, how do you get people to invest more into their retirement, how to be more secure? So that's an amazing mission. For the company, and it makes it much more interesting to build the data capabilities to do this effectively.
So your mission is not just sort of a technical one, but is kind of integrated into the core of the product offering for the entire company.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just technical missions aren't particularly interesting. I mean, not the technology isn't interesting, but it is. But it needs to be, again, I'm going back to my roots. It's how do you effectively use the data to promote business goals, business strategy of the company. And that's what made the job at Voya very interesting. And so we've been building this out. It's been 2.5 years, and it's been a very interesting and challenging journey of establishing this reusable data capabilities. And we're well on our way, and I think we're doing very well. One of the projects that's coming up that's really exciting for me, it's actually an intersection of all 3 teams. And that's data-driven distribution. We recently hired an executive on our investment management business to drive data-driven distribution for investment management. And that's where all 3 of my teams are working together, from enterprise architecture, of course, establishing the architectural principles and data integration tooling and principles, my Salesforce team on CRM data, and my data team to bring a mastered intermediary and organization data to support our CRM strategy and to support distribution analytics. And that is incredibly exciting. This project is kicking off in the next couple of weeks, and all 3 teams are just really ready to go and start working that.
Wow, it sounds really challenging. So, what are the things that you're wrestling with as you do such a big project that integrates so many different people and teams? What are the biggest challenges that you're going to face, and what are you most worried about?
Well, as always in data projects, and it's not only at Voya, it's pretty much every time I've had a data-driven job, the biggest challenges are cultural. So
the
technology,
human stuff.
it's a human stuff. Yes, it's humans. It's not technical challenges. I mean, there are technical challenges, but you also have much better tooling to address technical challenges now. It's a cultural shift. It's a cultural shift to think about about the underlying data, about how we do operations for any business unit that enables reusable data assets. And it goes back, for example in Citi that we always had, we called it our motherhood and apple pie slide. And it showed that every business pretty much has the data they need at the data quality level that they need it. It's when you want to bring the data together and use it across multiple business lines, then when you run into problems where you need data management, data governance, and reusable data asset. But to get there, it needs to be a priority change on the business line side. And that's a human problem.
Yeah.
That's a business process problem. It's a cultural problem. It's who owns the data, who is accountable for data, and accountability from front to back. So that's always been in all of my career the biggest challenge that you have in data. And it doesn't matter what tools we have. We can have tools, and we do have tools to make data quality more transparent, data definition easier to manage, to consume the data once you have it, easier to integrate the data, to use machine learning and AI to recognize data patterns. All of that exists, so all of that is easier. The culture, that's hard.
I get it. When I was managing data over at data engineering over at Novartis's research group, we used to describe every lab was like its own island of data, and getting them to share, collaborate, or even align their data was the biggest problem, this human problem. So what are the tools? Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you get people to believe that it's worth it to change in the interests of sort of serving this broader, bigger data asset?
Well, slowly. Slowly. A lot of it is communication. And a lot of it, again, it goes from consumption. So I can go in the beginning, 2.5 years ago, when we started the Data Foundation Initiative and when we made a business case for it to be funded. A lot of it was, it's a mess right now and it's going to be so much better after we're done. But a lot of it was what I call hand-waving, because there was nothing in place, there was no proof. It was just words, right? Words, and of course, the history that I have that I brought to the job. But again, so in 2.5 years, you go from consumers and you go, here is how, so we've built a little bit and now it's used and it's making somebody's life a little bit easier. And now if only on the business side, we change the operational process and make it a little bit better, there is a better outcome here. And interestingly enough, the COVID pandemic, what we are going through right now, made it actually easier.
Really? How so?
Everything is becoming much more digital. So analog experiences, so we would probably, well, I don't know, but if we weren't in this situation, weren't all sitting at home, we probably would have been doing this in person. We wouldn't be relying on all kinds, on this platform, which I would much rather mind you do it in person than do it over Zoom, but that's a different conversation. But a lot of communications are much more digital right now. Because people don't want, there is no physical way. There is really letters, used to be. Now that we know there isn't transmission of services, it's not as much, but in the beginning, letters were suspect as well. So a lot of communication is digital. Also, situation was changing and is changing now with so quickly that you need your analytics much quicker. So the old infrastructures, the reports that used to come out once a month, because it took 3 days to 5 days to load the data, and then another 15 days to clean the data, and then another 15 days to run the reports. Now a business asks for data much more often, and now you want to go back into history. Majority of the data warehouse, unless it's very difficult to build history. This is one of the most difficult things enterprise data warehouse does, figuring out how do you build history. And a lot of existing data assets don't, and now you want to have that because you want to see how people's behavior changed on a much more detailed level. So actually that's helping also to get people to understand that underlying data and enterprise data capabilities are very important to get the analytics, to get the business reporting that we want.
That's a really interesting topic. So can you talk a little bit about like this idea of like data lineage and provenance and like, I know you've done a lot of that in your career and arguably, in financial services is like the cutting edge of this. And I think that a benefit is, hearing for other people in other industries to hear how you've been dealing with and managing data lineage and provenance in your projects.
So data lineage is a very challenging subject that I find. I have worked in and around data lineage all the time back from Citi. And if you have a legacy companies, and majority of the companies are legacy, or they have a large footprint going in back many years, they usually have spaghetti. code or spaghetti diagram. When you go to data flows, that's the best example that you can give. It's a spaghetti diagram. And if you want to do the lineage by hand, it's pretty much impossible. Of course, by the time you finish documenting all of your flows, the changes they're not true anymore. The changes have been made. Now you're on, and you need to start all over again. And it's enormous amount of investment and money that need to be spent to keeping it up to date and never really get to the full picture. There is some tooling out there that kind of tells you that it can discover lineage through code crawling or connection scrolling, and we have tried to do that at Deutsche Bank. And it works to a certain degree. There's some limitations on how much it can do and how complicated it is. There is also some process changes you can make then when you keep track of your changes using your usual SDLC. What I have found the most effective way of dealing with the lineage is to build from metadata-driven architecture. So the environment that we are building here in Voya is actually self-documenting. So of course we have documentation because you can't really build ETL jobs if you don't have the lineage documentation. This attribute goes here, and this is transformations. But as we develop and as we bring more and more, just inevitably, it doesn't mean how much discipline we have. The documentation is gonna fall behind.
So is this, make sure I've got this right. So what you're describing to me feels like something like Swagger for data. Is that a fair?
What do you mean by Swagger?
Swagger is the automatically generated documentation for APIs. As you build APIs, it sort of automatically publishes.
That's not. That's an interesting thought, and I will take it back to my team, and I will we'll talk about that and see if we can do that. But actually, what I talk about is that everything you build generates metadata that gets saved. So we build a product that brings raw data into data lake. It generates metadata when it brings that data in, and it saves it in metadata repository. So any transmission, every single transmission, you see how many attributes went, what were the attributes on the source system, what were the attributes when it landed. Obviously, all the ETL tools have that. All the modern ETL tools tell you that. Right. So we, in our tool that we're distributing the data, we're exactly the same. It generates metadata as it works. Not as a documentation at the beginning, which you need to, not marking documentation, but generating as you move data, generating metadata what you've moved. To me, that's the only way to effectively do lineage.
So it's the continuous generation of the metadata and all the changes that are reflected in that repository that then you can go back and prosecute that as a tool to understand lineage. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Have you done that effectively? I mean, it sounds like you've been practicing this. Like, have you been able to make it work?
Well, that's one of the design principles for the enterprise data platform that we're building at Voya. So within the platform, we have made it work. Now, of course, now there is a huge environment before us and then after us. So then you go back to the combination of things. So everything that you build is new. You build based on that principle. Everything, and then you do combination of documentation and SDLC changes, and that's where owning enterprise architecture and architectural review and the process for controlling the changes and what information projects have to put in when they create the change. That way it's helped. So you have a combination of things.
So it sounds like your mandate is much bigger than data. Again, it sort of crosses over into product, but also into the overall technical architecture supporting the entire company.
Yeah, enterprise architecture is outside. It's not only data, it's overall enterprise architecture for Voya, so including architecture governance, including our technology and application landscape. And one of the most interesting, more interesting efforts that I've been part of, that's been led by our enterprise architecture team, is our public cloud journey. So I'm learning a lot from all parts of the company, from our security team and our infrastructure team and my enterprise architecture team, is how do you take the company Voya's footprint to the cloud. We're not there yet, so it's still work in progress.
So tell me more about that. I mean, there's a lot of people that are curious about how they're going to get to the cloud, and is now the right time, and whether like what stage are you at? You say you're taking your first steps, and do you have stuff running natively in the cloud yet? And are you running experiments, or do you have stuff in production?
Well, yes to all of this. We have some pieces that run on the cloud. We have we have POCs. We have, from data perspective, we're doing quite a bit on the cloud, or we're planning to. It's still not in production. So we have, Voya has multi-cloud footprint between SaaS applications as well. All of or majority of the company, I mentioned Salesforce. That's a SaaS. Workday, that's a SaaS. There is tons of apps out there. People don't even realize that they are on the cloud. So on the public cloud, I think now is an excellent time to go to public cloud. It's not bleeding edge anymore. So it's not, you have security on the cloud. You have incredibly good people. All of the public clouds, three major public clouds invest incredible amount of money into security, because obviously any security breach would be front page news, and it's huge impact on their business. So from the security perspective, while you of course have to pay attention to security, and we work very closely with the CISO and our security team at Voya, it's been very well developed and it's quite mature. From the public cloud perspective, it offers a lot of new capabilities to take business forward, and as companies get to the cloud, that's an edge that you have. That eventually, right now, it's an edge. In a couple of years, it would be table stakes.
Wow. So a couple of years.
A couple of years. I may be overly, yeah. But so think about what I've heard recently from one of the consultants in that space, was that to think about transition from on-prem to the cloud the same way we thought about from mainframe to client server.
Gotcha.
Right? So it's not cost per se. Though there is a cost structure there as well that potentially could be very favorable on the cloud, but it's new capabilities. It's ability to bring more to the business from technology perspective to support business growth. And then eventually it becomes, you can't hire people who know how to do stuff on-prem. Everybody wants to work on the cloud. How many COBOL programmers can you hire currently?
Right.
I mean, I know my father, who is a COBOL programmer, still is getting calls. Yeah.
It's I think about all those people that are used to racking and stacking servers, inside of these data centers, and 10 years from now it'll be less important, or they'll all work for Amazon.